Miss Sheila Griffin, it is such a pleasure to be with you today. How are you?
Oh, I'm always doing well. It's my joy.
Absolutely. So I want to jump right into it because I feel like you have such an extraordinary story to tell. So I want to start off all the way at the beginning, all the way back in Live Oak, Florida. Could you share and expound a little bit on your upbringing? I know you didn't spend that much time in Live Oak before you guys moved on, but what was the experience like being from a smaller country town?
It was very unique because it was a microcosm. We had a strong woman, Lizzie Miller, that raised my mom, that had a farm, that owned a store, that was a widower, that actually raised 4 and 5 other families besides my mom. And so during our time there, it was the place where if you were making a mistake, you could go correct it. It was the place where when you were young, you learned how to split wood at age 5 with a giant anvil and a hammer. It was the place that taught you how to fight for things that are important.
Right.
So that's what Live Oak means to me.
Gotcha. Now, in your personal experience living there as a child, how were your mother and father influential in your life in the upbringing, and what did they do to bring you guys to the city life when you relocated to Clearwater?
They relocated to Clearwater when I was 3. So that relocation was spurred by opportunity and family. My father's from Perry, Florida. So his brother moved to St. Petersburg. He moved to Clearwater and began as a roofer. And so he took sundry jobs from there, from life insurance and things of that nature. But the impetus was always to have work, and not necessarily field work. And so that's what got our family here.
Gotcha. So were you guys an entrepreneurial family, you could say, or did you kind of just work hard as much as you can until you're able to build that legacy for the family?
Both. All my life, my parents have always owned a business.
Gotcha.
They have always worked, and they have always been in school.
Gotcha.
So from the time that I was really young, my mom was a LPN, where she was in school, and she was working. And they had a small business at that time. So most of our life has been spent watching and learning about being in business so that you have something if there is a rainy day, but also about just knowing how to function and still gain. My mom had 5 children. So 5 children, now you're in school, you're at Mound Park Hospital, later on Bayfront Center. It just changes the dynamics of how you function. Each child has to learn their way, and they have to learn their path so that they can fulfill whatever God has called them to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, do you think that you, in addition to your siblings, do you feel like you guys carried on exactly what your parents intended on you guys as growing up to be?
I think we did more.
Absolutely.
Because we really functioned and focused on education. But at no time did my parents allow us to relax in that.
Interesting.
So one sister's a pharmacist, another one retired as a manager and for IT with the fire department, city government, and another one owns her own business doing hair. My baby brother did cooking and chef and had his own business. So what happened with us is we became more mature. Whatever education we were able to level, we would shift it to business.
Got it.
No matter what.
That's a great concept to follow. Oh, they did good.
Well, remember when you work for someone else and their job, I understood all my life that that's their business.
And you're providing for their dream.
When the scripture requires that you mind, not just M-I-N-D, but M-I-N-E, your own business.
Yes.
So when you're following text, you need to understand that when you finish working for Mr. Whoever, then somewhere you cannot get an inheritance for your children unless you work for yourself.
Right.
They will give you a 20-year watch, 50-year watch or pen, but your children will receive nothing else. So unless you understand that, unless you're doing business, you have no inheritance. Some people can save a little and actually save hundreds of thousands of dollars by just pinching. But that meant they also decided not to live.
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
But in business, you can decide to live and save.
Right, and you determine for how long.
Yes.
Now, with all of that being said, you graduated early in 1975 from Boca Ciega High School. How was that experience back in the day? We already know how Boca Ciega is in this day and age, but how was it being a student at Boca back in that time?
Well, remember that during the time that I was in high school, we had just transitioned to integration.
Right.
So we were in the middle of riots.
Right.
But Boca Ciega was one of the schools patterned after colleges. So on Monday and Tuesday, my schedule was, Monday and Wednesday, my schedule was loaded to 1 o'clock. But on Tuesday, I had 2 classes. On Thursday, I had 2 classes. And on Friday, I had all of my arts or drafting or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But Boca Ciega for me was just a place that I could grow and learn things on the social level.
Right.
So everything from being involved in student government to thespians to working as a cheerleader or whatever, just learning how to nuance things.
Right.
There were things about Boca that were very difficult. Some of the tensions related to race were too high. So I remember when I took the SAT test. One of the young girls from the skate, she says, "How did you get that score?" And I looked at her like,
Wow, that's a bold question to ask.
Oh, but it's a norm because when you've never been socialized with people, you presume they don't know what you know.
Right, right.
And so I never answer those crazy questions. It's okay for you to ask them. I'm just never going to answer that.
Right.
Because there's a presumption loaded.
You know it. You know it. So tell me, when it came to being a high schooler, but outside of school, what was the environment like in the city of St. Petersburg, again, during that time?
It was exceedingly tense. I remember my father being stopped in alleys. I remember the alleyways because they thought he might be doing something nefarious or something illegal when he was simply trying to go home away from the rioting that was occurring downtown.
Right.
I remember when a portrait was taken down at City Hall, and it created so much turmoil. The level of theft in the African American community in St. Petersburg is so high. So most people don't understand why the people are weary. During that time, the theft came in the form of the I-275 corridor.
Oh, yeah.
Which they promised would stop at 5th Avenue North. But in order to steal all those businesses on 22nd, you needed to take that corridor. There are many ways that you subject the people to having less in the next generation. But the first one is to make sure their children do not have businesses to work in. Because there's something simple about working together. The greatest shift in America is that children no longer work with parents. So they don't understand the rigors of what was required for that iPad.
Right. Oh, I see that every day.
So when those things are not connected, we lose something.
Right.
We lose something that's very, very important to the heart and very, very important to the next generation.
Right. Now, to expound on that, having those experiences growing up and then transitioning into becoming a wife and a mother.
At this point in my life, I choose family. And the reason I choose family is because being an advocate, being a regional planner, being working with Swift-Mud as an assistant general counsel, it doesn't matter what you have done when it's all said and done. If you didn't go back and get your children, your children's children, and your children's children's children, you have absolutely nothing. During that time, we had our 3 birth children. We raised foster children. It was a model after my great-great aunt, which we call grandma. It was also a model for my mom. In our house, we had people who were known as brothers and sisters. They just were known as brothers and sisters. They weren't, they just came and lived and stayed and stayed and stayed. So it's been generational. It comes from an understanding of community. Absolutely. That your child is mine.
Right.
And he actually belongs to me.
Right.
Because
Because it
People-
takes a village.
Well, people are offended when you take up their child.
Yeah.
I had one woman says, I've never been to Bahamas. You're taking 25 children per year to Bahamas to train them. Why would I let my daughter go? And I've never been out the country. And she didn't let her go.
Well, that's because she didn't see the bigger picture.
She fought her daughter's future.
Mm-hmm.
And her daughter was brilliant. Not economically empowered or anything like that, but just she was already rich.
Right.
And so many times as I loaded into being a mom, it was really hard because within a couple of years of being married, I think my baby girl was like 20 days old, 30 days old. My husband was paralyzed for life. So you're learning to be a mom, but we're already foster parents. So we've got 3 other kids that are living in the house. It's important to just kind of understand the rigors of what it means to settle in. I was fortunate. The church I was in yielded 2 women who became like counselors to me. I also belong to this organization called Women's Aglow. And the women would tell me, they said, what do you do? I said, because it becomes hard. People are telling you, well, I wouldn't stay there. That means your husband paralyzed for life. Or these children are just too much. Oh, you still gonna do foster children? But when you have wise women, not women who are given to foolishness, because age does not determine wisdom.
Absolutely.
When you have wise women, they say the dividends of staying with your husband is worth it. Y'all go to counseling, honey. The dividends of being at your children's game, every single game is worth it. But one of the things that was important that I didn't stop dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
From the age 8, I wanted to be an attorney. Perry Mason and I had a private secret romance.
I remember Perry Mason.
My daddy watched, we had a fight all the time because he watched the Wild West and I wanted to see Perry Mason. So my heroes began to be people like Barbara Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
people like Bonhoeffer,
Mm-hmm.
or even Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
People like Churchill, really? I said, they get it done.
Right.
Because it's not good enough. I am ingrained in this thing called family. And sometimes we don't always get it right.
Right.
But regardless of what you've done or where you've been, you get another chance. From the time my husband passed till 2016 or 12 or something, I hadn't seen any of my grandchildren in between. What that means is, consciously, all I could think about was all the children I raised. I raised 32 children. And I have not seen one grandchild. And if I see them passively. They don't know me or they don't know the hardship. So for every degree, there's a level of pain.
Right.
Most people do not understand the significance of education. Education makes you forsake the lie of emotion. That's why a hot-tempered person can never think logically because they're in the middle of lies.
Mm-hmm.
But if you dare to invoke your intellect will route you past your pain. So when you look at the degrees and the craziness that's on my form, it wasn't that I was trying to be somebody big. I just was trying to be somebody who survives and then thrives.
Right.
So while I'm working on an AA degree, I get married, I come home, and I got my first baby on the way. That bachelor's, I got the second baby on the way,
Mm-hmm.
and we're finishing. That master's, my husband became paralyzed for life. So that doctorate was in the middle of us deciding that we are going to still continue forward. So that doctorate was right after he's totally paralyzed. And we went to University of Florida and decided to stay. It's important to decide together. We stayed here instead.
Mm-hmm.
That was the year all those women lost their lives at the University of Florida.
Wow.
So when we come back home, we stayed in a place of faith and prayer because knowing how to move, it didn't matter that I wanted to be a lawyer all my life.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't matter that I got accepted and I had 3 children already. I couldn't go now. I looked up and it was time to go. I was past every deadline and miracles started happening. They accepted me on this deadline, this deadline, full ride. So we were back at Stetson. And I consider it the place of great incubation.
I consider it that way too, because I have some notes that I wanted to share with you, although I know you know your accomplishments, but these stood out. I have to brag on you for a moment. If you recall, you served as the editor for Stetson Law Review and was one of the first African American students chosen to Stetson Law Review in history. You were president of the Black Law Student Association.
Yes.
You were a part of the faculty student recruitment team, the Christian Legal Society, the Student Bar Association, the American Bar Association Law School Division within the Labor and Employment Law section. You also earned the Cecil C. and Augusta Bailey Awards based on character, academic achievement, and capacity. Yes, ma'am. And the Moot Court Oralist Award. Don't forget about that. But wait, you also passed the bar on the very first time. I've never heard that.
Here's the deal. If you put God first for real, He'll order your day.
Absolutely.
I kept thinking that I'm at church and these people are in the library studying, and I would panic. And I would say, well, but I teach youth at church. I schedule all their trips, all their camps. I fundraise for the kids that doesn't have money. And God would reassure me that He would tell me what's on the test. I know that sounds crazy.
No, it doesn't.
So
Not
I
at all.
stayed in that place and just stayed faithful to that. And what happened was, when I first started, I hadn't figured it out. I think I made 2 C's my first semester. I said, C's? I don't make C's. What's that? And I remember my daughter asking me, she was around 3rd or 4th grade, Mommy, are you ashamed of your C's? I said, oh no, look at all these people with straight F's.
Right.
But for the next semester, I figured it out. I had 24 hours in a day, and I ran my schedule opposite the children. So I was awake when they were asleep. I was in school, and then I went to sleep while they were in school. When I woke up, I'm doing dinner, I'm playing and whatever. I get me 2 hours worth of sleep, and I'm studying. So I figured it out, how to actually grab what you need in the middle of all kinds of chaos. So those things that you're talking about are things that just happened as we went, because there were needs. Trying to do that, and also I created 3 internships with federal courts, EEOC, and with Judge Kavashkins. And they had never been there because federal courts were reserved for Florida, University of Florida students.
Right.
They had never had Stetson students. But with the internship, now we had Stetson students actually working. Every law school is tied to its mission. Stetson, we will litigate you in the ground. That's our mission. We are the top litigating attorneys in the state. But Florida is a judicial school. They want to all be judges.
Gotcha.
Miami, they all want to do immigration law and contracts.
Makes sense.
Florida State is political. So you go to the niche, right? So that's why we were never there. Only one issue. I knew I would work for a federal judge, period. So I worked for the first African American judge ever appointed, Henry D. Adams. Then I worked for Judge Kavashkins right behind that. Because when they would leave for lunch, I just didn't. When all the interns left for lunch, I didn't go to lunch. I'm here exactly 3 hours, I work exactly 3 hours. I'm here for 4 hours, whatever it is. I don't go to lunch. Because everything you do while you're in school, people will let you in their back room as long as you're in school. But when you're black, you better have somebody, third party, ratify your credentials. And if you walk out of that school without that ratification, you're a fool. So I went and begged EEOC to please create an internship. I went and begged Basically, I need the credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked for the largest civil rights law firm in Tampa, so that I could have those credentials.
Absolutely.
So it just made a difference. It helped me out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Stetson was like a homing ground for just kind of learning to build. But there was a lady there that was very important to me,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody would have ever noticed her. She was the woman who ran the bookstore. I think her name was Helen, but I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
She helped me find every African American graduate from Stetson to begin the fledgling part of creating the Black Law Association in Pinellas County, NCP.
Wow.
Because there was no such thing. And her and Judge Stringer from Tampa
Mm-hmm.
were the two that we put together all the lists and all the names. But she's an unsung hero. But every every African American that comes through Stetson, she had all their pictures up. She had kept everyone. So while they were going through school, nobody sung their praises. Nobody, who's gonna pay attention to her?
Mm-hmm.
But she was paying attention to them,
Right.
and she was proud of everyone.
Wow.
Everyone. And many times on our journey, we are looking up when we should be looking around, because there are people who are counting on us to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that every day will yield that.
Right.
We have to make sure that we at least put in the work
Right.
and don't lie.
Absolutely.
Pretending like you putting in the work and you took a 5-hour sleep. I'm like,
Right.
what? So anyway, so that's what Stetson meant to me. It was just a huge part of formation. I still didn't know what kind of law I wanted to do. Matter of fact, I thought I wanted to do property, but we had a professor there who was very hard on African American students. Every one of them got a DRF. You are not going to give me anything to change my GPA. That's not going to happen.
Right.
So they even allowed us not to take his classes. In other words, you acknowledge that there's a problem. You don't correct the problem. You allow us to go around it.
Right.
So it became, I thought that was going to be my major since I was in all kind of real estate transactions and regional planning and all that. But it turned out to be, I found a passion in labor and employment law. There was a white male banker who had spoke on behalf of a black female employee, and they fired him. So that ended up being the case that came across my desk when I worked for Harris, Barrett, Mann and Dew. It changed everything. Everything. They gave me, 2 hours to write a brief on that? I think I spent 3 days because I just was so enthralled with the law.
Right.
So it became my area of specialty.
You have just been in the right place, in your place.
It is, and it's called my place.
Yes.
I wouldn't take anything, like they said, I wouldn't take anything for the journey, but many people all around you help.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who kept my children so I could be at women's retreats, so that I could teach young women or mentor.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that happen that allow a woman to move.
Yes.
Because when it's all said and done, you have to choose family as destiny.
Mm-hmm.
When you're an incubator, when you're a womb bearer, the end of the matter is how are your generations going to function,
Mm-hmm.
and how can you get them done.
Right.
So even though I set a pattern, some patterns were good, some patterns were not. Because self-care was not on my top of my list.
And as a mother, it usually isn't.
So I taught that to my daughter.
Mm-hmm. And break the cycle.
And I watched my granddaughter to see what she's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know I didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say something called functioning. Functioning basically means I'm in great pain, but I'm not going to let you know it.
Right.
Okay, I show up every day as
Mhm.
though everything's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is such a thing as counselors and mental health for that.
Right.
When your loved one have died, you don't have to
Yes.
function.
Yes.
You can actually go through grief and come out. I didn't do too bad. So we did great strides, but there were also things that I was very, very concerned about. So the essential work, though, is still children on my journey.
Mm-hmm. And that leads us to today. You work very close with your family. So could you share with me and expound more on everything that you and the Turner family are working on together, have been working on, what's to come? You guys have a lot behind the scenes that you've been doing.
All the degrees, I have a culminating degree is theology.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know the laws of men, I thought they were faithful. I thought men's laws didn't change. I thought they had some concrete in them. I thought I could trust them. I did not understand until I finished law school that they vacillate like water. That they can be a vapor one day and a strong wall, the next you can't even get in. That's what law is. So it made me regress back to the laws of God. And so I headed into theology school to learn. I didn't know that the head of every religion, from Calvin to Bonhoeffer to all of the great theologians, were all lawyers. That started the Methodist Church, the Baptist Church, all of them were lawyers.
Wow.
Because they had a concept and an understanding of the brilliance of God. His word is true, and everything else that you mold around it is going to survive. So when I moved and we started talking about doing something for our family trust is simply an investment for generations. And it's businesses that each one of us have businesses, we've all worked. But we've turned them over to the trust.
Gotcha.
When you divide, say like your father dies and he's a millionaire and he has 3 children. Now none of you are millionaires, all of you have $300,000. But if nobody ever breaks the corpus, which is the body of the trust, you all are millionaires. So because you're all millionaires, you can now go and buy a building that's worth about $50 million. You understand? What happened in the black community is we lost an understanding of math and what it means and how it multiplies. Because we're not looking for exponential growth, we're looking for seed growth.
Right.
Which means, we're not looking for multiplication, we're looking for exponential growth. So every time I plant something, I do not expect it to yield a seed back to me. That's an absurdity. So right now, each one of us play a key role in our mother's lives. But the thing that happens in our region and all of these degrees and all the credentials is the humility to know that that's not who you are. That it was on your journey to get something. I like the way we created games for children. And so the children are like, well, when I get on the next screen, I'm going to get a sword. And on the next screen, I'm going to get this. Well, life is really like that. By the time you get here, if you don't have these things you need, you're just going to fall with the wind.
Right.
But it wasn't that God did something against you. It's that you did not come prepared.
Right.
And you require challenge at all times in order to be strong. There's no such thing as strength without courage. And there's no such thing as courage without commitment. You can't do it. Those 3 are interlocking because courage is going to protect every other value you say you believe in.
Right.
And without courage, everything falls. And there are days when I've been super courageous. I promise you I ate the pill. And I can just cut out anything. And then there are days I'm not sure I'm enough.
Right.
But we don't have to worry about the days when you don't feel like you're enough. I tell people, I said, talk it through for the day. You only have a pity party for so many hours and you're done.
Right.
Because now we have to get the work done.
Yes, ma'am.
And you always have to work. When I retired from Pinellas County. From working with felons with the Department of Corrections. I went there because a friend said that it was impossible for them to get jobs. I said, that's not true, right? He said, Sheila, we've been able to get nobody jobs. So I got the highest number, 70 plus per month jobs. And they said, how are you getting these people jobs? I said, I'm not. And they said, well, but your numbers. I said, that's because I trained my people. They are already great. They were great when I met them. They are great when they leave this room. But I teach them that work is honor. And we're going to get this no matter what. I say because a large part of life has to do with yielding and beginning to know your own lane. And so while I was able to show them the transformation and began to work with the National Department of Corrections on making that a curriculum, and we're in Washington now, and we're doing some of that. So we always want to push back on anybody that lies about the ingenuity or the creativity of a human. So as soon as I hear somebody say, well, they can't, I just look at it, just go, It's obviously, but I have to be careful now because used to, when I was younger, I would just go, excuse me, and I'd push them aside and say, let me show you this. I don't do that anymore. Instead, now I create a way to incubate that thought. and share it with 4 or 5 more people. Because now the things that you know, you are not enough to disseminate them. And if you disseminate them to just one, you still have not done anything. And you will not be known for doing anything. We headed into Washington. The reason that we doing Portraits of Faith, most people pray. And they know prayer changes things, hallelujah. But what they don't know, if you fail to do the foundations, you can pray all you want to. I promise you that I did not, if I ate 3 donuts this morning and I tried to pray the calories away and just believe God I won't get diabetes, I'm a fool. And so, because we are asleep, everybody thinks they have a woke generation. What we have is a foolish generation who does not understand history. If you understood history, you would never tear anything down because you need to learn something from a fool. Make sure it's present so people can see it. And if they did something really horrific, preserve it for life. Instead, we're like counterculture. We're going to tear that down because they did something. We forget within 3 months. We need a monument to tell them. You cannot afford to let this move from your consciousness. Slavery was not just in America. Slavery is a global concept. And right now, nations are all going into slavery, but they don't understand how you make a slave. Until you understand how you make a slave, you can't even begin to understand what's happening in your laws. So the day I write a law, and it says you can't say these things right here, these 5 words. Close, I'm getting there. Going our way. Silence. I need you to be silent. Because as soon as I start silencing voices, then there's no opposition. Right. Oh, you want to own property? Oh, no. You want to give me affordable housing, but you don't give me home ownership. This is a problem. This is how you make a slave. This is how you make a slave. Oh, you want to give me jobs, and you want to give me all kind of stuff to stand in line and get checks, but you didn't give me businesses. This is how you make a slave. You got to make a slave come to you. The things that are happening globally, it's not just the United States. And many times in the United States, we focus so much on ourselves, we're not paying attention to anything that's going on in Madagascar. We don't know what's happening in Bolivia, what's happening in Nigeria, Zambia. So we don't know that the same tactics are being used across the board. And they're trying to create a whole population of people that stand in line and beg. When in fact, inside of them is actually the answer. Because greatness was made for every human. It wasn't made for one. And so the guy who shined shoes and that knew how to invest the money from the tips he got from the guys that were sitting above him while he shined shoes is still great. Yep. It doesn't matter what the thing. And each one of us are given a sphere of influence to get that done. I want to say something to you that is really important. When we say plenipotentiary prayer, there's 2 terms in the scriptures. There's something called a potent, which is a regent. There's something that's called a plenipotent, which is somebody who's over more regents than that. We would normally in our army call it a general. And then there's something called extra plenipotentiary. Those are really biblical terms. You don't see them often except in the guise of consulates in foreign countries. So as Christians, we believe we're foreigners here. But we've come in a name that has more power than anything. So once you've got the foundations, it's foundations plus prayer, not order.
Right.
And it's not prayer in place of. You can't substitute. You're going to still have to do the work of writing your congressman. You're going to still have to do the work of teaching the children. Right. You're going to still have to do the work of loving your husband. You're going to still have to do the work. So being a woman that's in business, that understands children and community, I know that the work doesn't stop. So when I wake up in the morning, I know that I'm making notes about the work. I make notes because it's different. Right now, we're doing some things where we're connecting the dots from my international law degree to foreign nations for prayer. Wow. So we're in Washington praying for senators and legislators because I need them to know that God has a standard. And I don't care which side you declare yourself to be on. The only side that's saved is God's. Right. And I need the pastors to begin to understand that this nation cannot function without you. You're over it. While they are representatives of humans, you are representatives of God. So we send to Congress representatives, but they are representatives of God in the earth, and they are called pastors, elders, mentors, who understand how to divide things out. These things don't come naturally. It doesn't come naturally to dwell at peace with all men as much as it has to do with you. That doesn't come natural, because he's going to cut you off.
Right.
So many times I'm trying to communicate in plenipotentiary prayer, not only the foundation, but also the potency. There's nothing more powerful. It is the only thing that shapes nations, and shift nations. You can't do it by lobbying. You can't do it by advocacy. You can't do it by picketing. I know all of the tactics. You can't do it by somehow or another creating a way that we no longer buy XYZ's product. Because God intervenes in the affairs of men. And so a lot of things, it's very difficult for me when I was an attorney to have people come in my office for prayer. It was more difficult when I was pastoring at Fortress of Faith, where people are coming there talking about they need an attorney. When you teach pastors the law, they are the creator of all mores. Law is when we basically codify them. We make what you believe into law. The reason America had prospered is because we kept believing. What they're trying to train us to do now is not to believe. Don't believe your history. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything. Well, that's not true. Even if history is left out, put the history as his story. So the story always goes to the victim.
Right.
Whoever won, that story is what's the. So if your people were not the victor, and you owned millions of acres in the middle of Arizona, and you are the nation's people that were here first, add your story. And start telling it. That story, I apologize. Don't eliminate that story, but be very intentional about inserting your story.
Right.
Because the book should have been 1,900 volumes instead of one, if we would have included all. We didn't include the Italians when they came here and were treated like slaves. We didn't include the Chinese when they came here and they were treated like slaves. We didn't include the Asians. We didn't include, it just goes on and on. The Germans, they were all treated in the same manner because people are always willing to make a slave. You just have to be willing not to be one.
Right. Well, that is astounding story.
I'm just saying, we just have to be willing not to be one. One of the things about the family trust, and I really don't, we focus on the fruit of the Spirit out of Galatians. And one day we were online, we pray 3 times a week. We meet once a week for the adults and once a week for the young leaders. Because the young leaders are the ones who they call the lion's lair. They are the vicious ones. They are the changers of every nation. By the time you're my age, you might not be able to climb as many mountains, I don't know. I can go to the mountain in the helicopter because I'm going to create one.
Right.
But young leaders can do things that are impossible. You must have the wisdom of the elder, the strength and stamina of the elder.
Yes.
So young are always taken away from the elder. So they flounder forever. And they don't know what's happening because they've never seen it. But the elders saw it. The elder, if they are alone, recluse, and everything they have to give goes into the dirt. So the separation is diabolical. Until we understand that. Until we understand that nursing homes are not for your people. Take care of your grandma. It's hard, but it's going to make you. It was hard when my husband became paralyzed, but it made me exceedingly compassionate.
Right.
So when I see something, I can go places that other people have never been, because it doesn't have anything to do with me personally, but I can feel them long distance. and know the price they're paying.
Right.
But if you've never been there, then you judge harshly. And that means that you never ever will succeed. You can't go anywhere.
Right.
There's a scripture that says, the blessings of the Lord he makes rich, and he adds no sorrow. There are many people who will chase money, but money will not chase them. Because the scripture says that if you follow God, the money will chase you,
Right.
not vice versa. Because your gift makes room for you, and you're not going to be sorry.
Right. That's facts. I appreciate you so much. Your story needs to be told. I want to do this again. At this point, Gerard, this is me rambling. I want to do this again. I'm going to be doing this again with the rest of the family. But I'm very appreciative of
We have to
you.
do something though. I just, as we were talking and we're talking about the time of women, it is, a woman does something that a man can't do, and a man is something that a woman can't be.
Absolutely.
I want you to hear me. A woman does something that a man can't do, but he is something that she will never be. And these women who think that they can be him, they cannot. But he can't birth nothing. I'm just saying. But your butt can't birth nothing without a seed. I'm just saying.
Yeah. And that's that on that for this wonderful Women's History Month.